Welcome, everyone, to the Zen Hustlers Balance podcast. My name is Jared Brick, the creator of Zen Hustlers. Zen Hustlers was a community I created after I went through my own personal journey as an entrepreneur, a parent, a spouse, and I was dealing with a lot of overwhelm and stress, and I was stuck in the hustle mindset. And I realized there's probably a better way to do it. So a lot of the things that we feature on Zen Hustlers as a community resource website are to support you. There's books, there's events, there's speakers. There's now a new sex page to support your sexual health, because what we talk about is from the bedroom to the boardroom. It increases everything. So during COVID, we realized we really wanted to talk to the people walking the talk, the people that are really living the path that we see as for Zen Hustlers. They have found balance in their life between work, play, fun, relationships, and they really want to give back with the work that they do now. So that's who we speak to at Zen Hustlers. And feel free to check out zenhustlers.com to learn more. We do have an upcoming event in the spring that we will be talking to you about more. It's called WATER, WTER, Wisdom, Transformation, Energy, and Reset. So stay tuned to learn more about that as we talk. So I was fortunate enough to get to meet this person in person, who we're going to get to talk to today. We are both in the Bay Area, but we're joining each other virtually today. So I'm going to be introducing Melyssa Barrett. Thank you for joining us today, Melyssa.
Thank you for having me, Jared. It's
So
my
awesome
pleasure.
we get to talk to you today. So Melyssa is a CEO, a success coach, an author, speaker. She actually is the host of her own podcast, the Jolly Podcast. She is the former VP at Visa. She is the mother of 3 and a grandmother to 8. So if anyone can juggle a lot, it is this woman, and she does it with grace, ease, confidence, and I would say beauty. Thank you for doing it and speaking with us today.
Thank you for that wonderful introduction.
Was there anything in the introduction that you wanted to add or call out that really stands out to you when you hear it?
No, I mean, I think you did it perfectly. It was wonderful.
Which part of that are you most proud of personally?
Ooh, well, obviously being a mom and, grandma is the best. So, for me, that's kind of like just, what you treasure. But I think just being able to, I think being a success coach now is really exciting for me because it literally allows me to integrate everything together. And really, being a CEO, but the success coach, it's like you get to help people, all the time. So I just love it. I mean, it's like when I was working in corporate, I always felt like you had to be a particular way and you had to keep your personal life out of it, out of the conversation to some extent. And now I don't have to do that. I can be my full self.
And you're going to bring the whole stuff. I've met you as a success coach. So we're going to go back in time to the time when you were working in corporate. And is this Fortune 100 or 500? How big is Visa?
I think last time I checked, they were around 139 or something
Okay,
like
so they're
that.
close to that top 100 corporate in the world. So that
Yeah.
culture must have been an interesting time for you. So to go back in time, if you don't mind, describe what it was like working in corporate from a place of balance and having that full self-expression.
Well, I think, certainly it was a journey there. I mean, I started as a receptionist at night answering the switchboard telephone, and eventually, became an analyst and, moved up in the company. So it was transformative because the company itself, when I started, had 800 employees, and when I left, they were over 20,000.
Wow.
And so,
20x, over
so
20x.
yeah. So obviously they're a global company. They are a company that never sleeps because everyone at some point all over the world wants to make a transaction and, purchase something or, move money in some form or fashion. So for them to be down for even a few seconds is
Massive.
a problem.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
was that your department? Did you work in that department?
So I worked in so many different departments, but in the uh, every aspect of my background centered around risk. So whether it was credit risk, application risk, whether it was transaction risk on the fraud side, and later in my career, I managed as vice president, I managed a global team that was responsible for the optimization of those transactions. So we wanted to eliminate as much fraud as possible, but also optimize the number of transactions and approve those transactions that could be approved. And working in that global space, you never sleep, right? Because you might have to be on the phone at 10 p.m.
Like, yeah. What is it that walk us through a day that you remember that was like, man, that was a day. Like,
Oh, yeah. I mean,
for what that really looks like for you, what it did look like.
yeah, there were definitely days when I'd have to be up at 4 because I had, in many cases, a 2.5 hour commute.
Wow.
So I would, at the very least, be leaving my house by like 5:30. And I'd have to get to the office if I didn't have a call on the way to the office. And then, various meetings throughout the day. So you don't actually get to get a lot of work done because while you're at work, you're in all the meetings in order to figure out what has to be done, right? So then, with a global team, you spend time with people in different time zones, and it can't always be your time zone that they are, considering you for.
Yeah.
So there were a lot of times where I'd be up and on a call at 6 a.m. and, finishing my last call at 10 p.m., having gotten home around 8 or 8:30 p.m. after my 2.5 hour commute back, if not 3, grab something to eat, say hello to the fam, and then you gotta go to work. No, you gotta finish doing some work.
Oh man, then you're working at night.
Yeah.
How late are you staying up at night to work?
Oh, there would be lots of days I'd be up till, 1 a.m. easy and, having to roll back over and get out of the bed at 4 a.m. So, yeah.
I can feel the level of challenge and struggle that must have been for you, and trying to raise children in the time period and be a mom and be a wife and all these roles you had to fulfill.
Yeah, and that's just a day
like you
in
were
the office.
did you ever feel like you were able to like fulfill on all the roles, or did you always feel like you were trying to catch up?
No, I mean, I think the roles were always impactful to me. I mean, I loved what I was doing. I loved the people that I worked with for the most part. There were a few, maybe I didn't. But I loved what I was doing. It was the company was fabulous. They have a dynamically changing, environment. So you always feel like there is innovation, technological advancement.
Yeah.
They are bringing, innovation into the marketplace for payment technology, right? So
you get to work in cutting edge tech, and it's exciting. When I say roles, I also mean the roles of wife and mother and friend and all those roles too.
Yeah, well, as a friend, I probably would say during that period of time, I probably wasn't the best because I wasn't around as much. And, as I mentioned, that was a day in the office, but, there would be many a days that I'd be traveling somewhere, whether it be within the United States or abroad, that would be challenging to make sure that I was even able to check in and, with my family, right? So I think I was blessed enough to have a husband who was very flexible at the time, and could be there for the family, and really kind of support me in my career while he was more artistic and creative and did a lot more on the performing side. So he tended to be more of the night hawk, and I tended to be the one who wanted to go to bed and wake up early.
Yeah. So tell me a little bit about the story of the transformation. So you're working like crazy. You're in an exciting company. It's a great role. You're doing all these things, but what's starting to happen in the backside that people aren't seeing?
Yeah, so probably the most significant thing was the one day that I woke up getting ready to go to the office, and my husband said he didn't feel good.
Mm.
And, I think we just thought it was the flu. And so I said, make an appointment, check it out, see what's going on. And that started about a week of activity where at the end of the day, he went into the doctor. They found some abnormalities in his blood. And next thing you know, he's in the hospital and he finds out that he has colon cancer
Mm.
and it's stage 4.
Wow.
So it was one of those moments where you start to really question what you have been doing for your life, to make sure that the important things are actually being attended to. And so I think I think we all want to do well. We all want to thrive. We want to make sure that we have enough money to do the things that we want to do.
Mhm.
But I grew up in a family where, work is priority.
Yeah.
Like you
I was
have
going
to
to ask
hustle.
you who taught you the hustle. So was it mom, dad, or both that taught you the hustle? How did you learn the hustle?
Oh, it was definitely my dad. Yeah. He
Okay.
was a marketing executive for Xerox, and really kind of grew up with the company. And we moved every 18 months
Wow.
for like
Almost like a
13 years.
military family, right?
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
And so when you were growing up, what was that imprint that you recall? Is it work is good? I need to work hard to succeed. Like what was that message of imprint from dad in the hustle?
Yeah, it was absolutely work hard, you will be successful, and there was a design to your life. You finish school, you go to college away from home. That was the first thing. You get a good job, you, find your partner in life, get married, and, ride off into the sunset, right?
And you did all those things. You accomplished all those things. And so
Well,
your
not
husband,
exactly in that order, but yes.
yeah, you ticked the boxes, maybe not in that order. So then fast forward, you've done all these things, you're going down the path, and then your husband gets sick, and you have this moment of what is that moment for you? What do you call that moment? Is it an aha moment? Is it a holy shit moment? What is that moment for you?
Well, I think I always, I'm very optimistic. So for me, it was like, okay, well, what can we do? Where do we need to go? Like, how do we address it?
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think I always looked at it like I never really looked at it like it was the end per se, but it did allow me to shift my focus to say, is the job and my career really what I want to leave this life, kind of focusing on?
Yeah.
And I think it allowed me to really showcase the gratitude that I had for our relationship and what he actually did for me. So I think it was that shift of gratitude, that I think sometimes we don't necessarily have the amount of gratitude for our spouse at the time that we really should. So that was probably the shift. And it was, it was about 17 months before he passed away. And that transition, my manager at the time, I will never forget, because my shout out to Mahesh. He was one of those people that heard what about it through my manager and invited me in his office. And he was our chief risk officer at the time. And he was like, this is a job, whatever you need time off, do it.
Yeah.
And I think,
Fantastic. Thank God you had a manager that understood and you didn't have to battle that.
Yeah. No, he was phenomenal.
Humanity, when it comes through, is really beautiful, isn't it? When people really step back and make it about something bigger, it's beautiful when it actually happens, especially in the workplace. I think there's something special about it
Absolutely.
coming through in the workplace, and maybe not in an environment that you're used to, but potentially.
Yeah, because it's a fast moving environment, right? I mean, life doesn't stop. So,
Yeah, that's so wonderful. And then, so walk us through that transformation in your own career. So, what point do you leave work?
I think, and this is a challenge probably for many people. My mother, I watched her go through this with my father. I'm not sure that you ever really know when you should take time off because you're always trying to figure out, do I take time off now or do I take time off when he really needs it later? Like,
Yeah,
at what point do you figure that out?
yeah,
And it's hard to know. And so for me, I know I ended up having a meeting in Dubai that I had to travel to in February. And I remember getting a call at some odd hour and the doctor telling me that my husband was not being responsive. And so I immediately got on the plane, flew back, of course, 15-hour flight. So that was
yeah,
challenging. And a friend of mine picked me up from the airport, took me to the hospital, and he was like, "Hey, babe, what's going on?" I was like, "What in the world?" Um, but we also realized that at that point that things were definitely changing, and I ended up taking time off right after that. I think he got out of the hospital about 3 days later, and I took time off at that point and you know, just kind of focused on attending to him.
got it, got it. And then, so unfortunately, Peter passes away.
He did, yeah, probably about, I think it was about maybe 3 weeks later or so.
Okay. And then, do you think, I'm not going to go back to Visa? I'm going to do something new with my life. What was that decision in your mind?
No, I think I mean, I was going back at the time that he passed away. I actually reported directly into the chief risk officer
Mhm,
at the time, and she was sat on the visa board.
mhm.
And so I always anticipated going back. I think there was some, obviously there's always organizational changes. That doesn't wait for whatever you have going on in your personal life. So there was lots going on at the within the company. And, I ended up moving to another department at the time, didn't really enjoy what that looked like.
Yeah,
And so it caused me to really, and I think just the event as a whole just caused me to really take a look at my life and figure out, is this really what I want to do for the rest of my working career? What do I want to do with myself? What is my purpose here? And, you kind of evaluate the fact that you were part of a couple for so long and now you're not. So it's almost like having, I don't know, I liken it to having to learn to walk again because it's like half of your body isn't there anymore. And so I had to really figure it out, like go inside and really understand like who I am, what am I going to be doing, and what do I want to do.
so that brings me
And
to the
that's
work
when
that
I
you do. Yeah, so who were you listening to? Who was it? Did you have any books, inspirations? Like, what was guiding you at that period?
So what guided me at that period was somebody whispered in my ear about getting a coach.
Got it.
And, my husband had actually had a coach, during his, days, because he was the CEO of his own company, which made him a lot more flexible than I was. But it was through the coaching that I really started to understand who I wanted to be, what experiences I wanted to have, and that there was this alternative way of working that wasn't about the hustle, but it was more about the purpose and how I wanted to exist in life and leave a legacy.
Are you seeking more balance, finding your flow, creating space in your life to make clear and healthy decisions, exploring new practices and dynamic habits that will empower your life with purposeful energy? Drop into Water with us, a live interactive event hosted by Zen Hustlers here in Santa Cruz, California, a place known for balance. Water is wisdom, transformation, energy, and reset, honoring the 4 directions in life to support you fully. Zen Hustlers is bringing together wise voices as engaging speakers on transformation, movement experts to share how they transfer and move energy, and live musical performances that align with our theme of water. Stay tuned for the updates and head over to zenhustlers.com to join the list and be the first to be invited. Drop in, the water feels great. So you end up hiring a coach.
Yes.
Is this our colleague in common, or is this someone else?
Yes. I ended up with Steve Napolitan, who I had known for a long time.
Yeah.
But I will tell you, he called me after Peter passed away. I will never forget the conversation we had, because he literally told me that he and Peter had their own relationship, and he wasn't able to make his service because he had an actual workshop that day that he was giving.
Yeah.
And he felt bad that he couldn't be there. And I was like, I mean, of course, go do what you got to do.
Yeah.
And so he was like, if there's anything I can do, like, let's, just let me know. And, I ended up letting him know.
Yeah.
You can help me, And so he just kind of jumped in with both feet and started, helping me figure it out. Mindset is a huge thing when it comes to where you are, especially when you're transitioning.
Got it. Yeah. And just a little background context. Steve is someone that we met through. Steve has been interviewed on our podcast multiple times, and he's one of our kind of role models and hustlers who's really walking the talk of been through a journey personally. Now he's a coach, and he's really given back. His programs are called More Business, More Life. He's a success coach. He's an author. He's a speaker. He's a father, and he's been through so many personal journeys to give back and be a grounded resource. So he's my personal success coach, and you're working with Steve directly now. So I love this arc, right? This story arc of like where you've been through and, what you've come through. So how do you go from working at Visa to success coaching? Tell us that story.
Well, it isn't an easy transition, because I think, when you're used to corporate and you're used to the hustle, it's really hard for you to understand what that will be like. No safety net. I'm just going to quit and do something else. And, it's all on me, right? As the CEO of my own company to make it happen. And I think Steve really guided me through that. He likes to use the analogy that he's, on the tarmac with the cones, kind of leading the plane in, but I'm the pilot. And I think for me, it was a matter of him, providing a lot of support, even permission in some cases, because he would ask me things like, plan some fun. And I would be like, what's fun? Like, I'm not sure exactly what that means.
Yeah. When you're not used to asking these questions of yourself, it's like, well, wait a minute. Do I know how to, bring joy, bring fulfillment, bring fun back into my life, especially going through that challenging experience of losing your husband? I mean, so rediscovering yourself is a huge part of this, right?
Absolutely. So, and it was him, he was really the first one that said, you should. I said, I really want to dive into diversity, equity, and inclusion, because George Floyd just had happened, and I was, struggling with a lot of different emotion. And I will tell you, he was the one that said, you should start a podcast, because he was like, I said, I really want to know what other people are doing when they think about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And he said, what a better way than to have people come and talk about it. And So that's what I did. And really the Jolly podcast is kind of a head nod to my husband, who called himself the Jolly. He was a performer, a storyteller, and an oral tradition storyteller. So he really brought a performance while educating people on, all sorts of history and fables. So it was pretty awesome to be
Oh, I
in his
love that.
presence.
And just for our listeners, it's spelled Jali.
Yes.
Yeah.
Jali
Root
is
of that word? Yeah.
yeah, it is a West African word for storyteller. Jaliya in some cases, or, some people call it griot. But he decided he would be called the Jali, and he embodied that spirit. So storytellers in Africa tended to follow royalty. They would be part of the royal group that would tell the history of the family,
Yeah.
and also speak on behalf of the people.
Interesting. And I love how it's like an homage to him as you keep his memory alive by doing the podcast, but now actually you're running it. So you're being it in reality
Yeah.
and having to step up to the mic literally and do the podcast. I love it. And we've,
Yeah.
been supportive of the podcast and even referred, a guest or two to their podcast. So really excited
Yes.
to be a part of
Yes.
that journey. So tell us, so
Absolutely.
you're doing DIE work, diversity, equity, inclusion work now. You're now, speaking, and you're being a coach. So tell me a little bit about, what does the day look like now?
It's so interesting because, it's one of those things where you get to a period in your life where you literally own your day.
Yeah.
You decide what your day is going to look like,
Yeah.
what time you wake up, whether you have an alarm to wake up or not. And so I love it because I don't have to wake up to an alarm. My body tells me when it's time to wake up when the light comes through the window. And, I normally, I'm not a big breakfast person, but I like to make sure that folks in the household are taken care of so that I can go off and do what I need to do for the rest of the day. But I usually start with some meditation, some journaling, because I feel like it grounds me. And there are days when I have to do 2 or 3 meditations throughout the day, because of things that are going on in the day, just to make sure that I could breathe and, pause and, listen to what is being provided to me. And really just that gratitude.
What do you use for meditation, just for our listeners? What format?
I typically listen to Kelly Howell.
Okay. We'll put
She does some great guided meditations. And I like that she uses binaural beats. And she has a variety of meditations, whether they're 10 minutes or 30 minutes or, an hour or whatever. So
Yeah.
I really appreciate her, but I also spend time, listening to music or, just meditating in silence.
Yeah. I always think it's good for people to hear what's the platform and what do people use and what's the modality and what's the apps and who are the experts. And it's one of the reasons why we exist, is to refer these resources to folks. So
Absolutely.
you're designing your day now, you're working with individuals, you get to kind of create the day, such a thing of beauty and freedom, right? And so now,
Yes.
what's fulfilling Melyssa now? Like, how you left a very different type of life. So now what's that center now that fills you up?
Well, honestly, I think it's a matter of the alignment of purpose. So I aside from spending time, focused on coaching, I spend a lot of time in the community doing, community service, whether it be for, different nonprofit organizations. I sit on a board in San Francisco that focuses on, creating balance from a financial perspective and credit counseling. So there are different aspects of my life that I like to bring in. And because Visa provided such a focus on being a network of networks, I tend to have a network of networks in my personal life. And so I spend a lot of time with organizations that are networks, whether it be a sorority or other nonprofit organizations. And so I create this kind of unit of sisterhood that has really allowed me to just bring joy along with my spiritual life. And they are, I think between my, my church, my spiritual center, and then, the networks that I have around me for just doing good in the world. How do we make this world a better place before we leave? Because life is short.
Amen. That's all I want to say. That you said so much in there that I wanted to jump in on and comment on. I think the big lesson for me is, instead of doing one main thing with work, you get to fulfill all these different parts of you now. The personal
Yes.
passion, the work passions, the community passions, your family. You get to feed all these areas of yourself now, as opposed to maybe putting all that energy into one area in the past prior. And not that you didn't use those other areas, but you really get to feed those areas well and feel deep fulfillment in all those areas. I think that's a beautiful journey, an arc for people to realize, like, it doesn't have to be all in one thing, one bucket per se.
Yeah, and I think you see that a lot more now with, even the gig workers and all of those
Yeah.
things. I think life used to be like you get a job and you do that job for 30 years or whatever, and then
Yeah.
retire and do stuff. Now people have a lot more choice.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be, you can do whatever you want. I think I never gave myself permission to do that. I just was following the path that I was supposed to, based on what my father taught me.
If Peter had never had that illness, had never passed away, do you think he'd still be at Visa?
Probably.
Yeah.
I probably would. I mean, honestly, Visa, it has some golden handcuffs. They
Yeah,
are
of course.
wonderful company.
Yeah.
And so I think I probably would. But I always felt like there was more that I could be doing, and I always wanted to do more with him.
Mhm.
So, this is my way of, giving gratitude. And, so now I spend a lot of time doing things that I love to do.
I love it. I love it. So give us a little insight. You are a success coach and a personal coach, and also do all these other things with your professional career. So what if people are listening now and they're watching this and you've piqued their interest, they're questioning, like, okay, there's more out there. There's more to this than I think. What's the next step for them? What should they be writing, questioning, asking, talking to? What's their next first step to take that's not so monumental, like, I'm going to quit my job tomorrow?
Yeah, I think the first thing is really allowing yourself to dream, and really figuring out what experiences do you want to have
Mm.
for the rest of your life. Like, what is the biggest thing you want to do, and how do you make sure that you're fulfilling that? But first you have to know what that is. And I think for me, I didn't know what that was. I
Yeah.
I had planned to retire and have a husband and travel and do all sorts of things. And now my journey was different. So I had to figure it out, like, what's next for me, and how do I fit in my skin as, not a widow, but this single person looking for fulfillment.
Got it. And I'm imagining that, people can reach out to you and to get a glimmer of the type of work that you do and potentially working with you, correct?
Absolutely. Yes. You can always find me at melyssabarrett.com. I do spell it a little different, MELYSSABARRETT.com. And so I'm Melyssa at melyssabarrett.com. But that's probably the easiest way to get me, because, you can find me and the Jolly podcast on, all platforms. So,
Yeah, we'll put a link to those resources for folks. So the last few things I want to do before we wrap up is, so you described your morning. What does your evening look like? Because I'm guessing that's quite different now too.
what's interesting about the evenings, and it was funny. I was listening to Steve yesterday, and he was saying that a lot of people turn on their alarm clock in the morning, and he puts his alarm clock on at night so that he knows that he has 30 minutes to go to bed when the alarm
Oh,
goes off.
oh, he sets an alarm to go to bed. Okay, got it.
Yes.
Got
Isn't
it.
that interesting? So I just thought that was interesting. But my nights, right now I have 4 generations living in my household. And so my evenings are usually spent with at least one of the grandkids, and trying to secure them into a sleep driven mode. um, eh, but once that occurs, I find myself, reading, just listening to music, just trying to wind down. I go through a process of what we call Plan Tomorrow Today,
Yeah.
which is just a way of reflecting on, gratitude and, figuring out how do I delegate, eliminate, or
Automate.
automate. Yes, thank you. I'm like, uh, but
I call it
just
the
figuring out
DEA. The DEA is always watching. And for those of you who don't
delegate,
know, we're a drug
eliminate, and automate.
enforcement
Yes,
agency, but I like to, delegate, automate, and eliminate. So the
eliminate.
DEA is
Yes,
always watching where can they get involved. That's how I remember
absolutely.
it. That's an acronym.
Yeah, so I think, it provides kind of a basis for making sure that you're hitting the goals that you want to hit and that you're focused on the things you want to be focused on. And anything I can do to eliminate or, delegate work, I definitely try to do. So I have a wonderful team behind me, and they are awesome.
Awesome. Thank you. There's so many insights here. So, last wrap up question. What's one mantra or what's one thing you can leave people that they are left with? And think of the journey you've been through in your life and the way you're now running your life and giving it back and paying it forward. What's one last kind of motto or mantra that you can use and share?
Hmm, I'm gonna have to think about that one. What is the last mantra? Um,
Do you have a
for
mantra
your-
that you use for yourself when things are not going the way you want them to, or you want to get back on the path? Do you have something you say to yourself?
honestly, when something goes wrong and I feel like things are derailed,
Yeah.
the first thing I do is seek some meditation, because to me I feel like if something's going off the rails,
Mhm.
you probably need to get back to center
Yep.
first,
Yeah.
just to gather what's going on. And because I've worked in risk for so long, when things go wrong, I'm used to things going wrong. So,
Yeah.
it doesn't freak me out, but you do have to figure out like what's the next step or what's the path. And
Mhm.
to me, being able to just, center yourself and figure out and ask yourself the question, like, what am I trying to do?
Yeah.
And, if whatever is happening isn't contributing to that, it probably doesn't matter. I mean, I used to have this saying when I worked at Visa, is like, is this going to matter in 5 years? And a lot of things don't.
Yeah. Look at the big
So,
picture. Step back, get the perspective, and look at the big picture.
yeah. I mean, just spend some time with yourself, and you would be amazed at what you get out of life.
There you go. See, it just came right to you. Just took a little inquiry, and then it comes right to you, right? It's been such a
Yes,
pleasure getting to talk to you today, Melissa. Thank you so much for your time. I realize how
thank
valuable it
you.
is, all the things that you're doing, and again, you just are so open and authentic to talk to, and we really appreciate you sharing your journey. I know it's not been an easy journey to share, So we really appreciate you doing it here today.
My pleasure. Thank you so much, Jared. Really appreciate all the work you're doing in the world.
Much appreciated. I feel that. So if you'd like to hear more stories from folks who've been through the journey or walking the talk, definitely check out the rest of the podcast. Head over to the zenhustlers.com website and look at some of the resources that we can support you. Stay tuned for the upcoming water event. It's about flow and balance and finding new ways to work and live in the world. And so that's all we're going to do today. Thank you again, Melyssa, and look forward to speaking with you soon.